Welcome to TorontoTV live broadcast. Recently, the federal government has announced an increased budget of $298 million increased for the immigration settlement budget. And this has been the largest increase for many years in the budget. And tonight, we are going to talk about the implications and concerns of the federal budget and immigration settlement issues. And we are glad to have Ms. Gloria Feng and Mr. Norman Beach to be with us tonight.
Glad to be here, Jeffrey.
Ms. Gloria Feng was the previous Vice President of CCNC, the Canadian Chinese National Council. She was the chair of the Immigration Settlement Committee. She is also currently the Vice President of Canada-Hong Kong Link, and she is also the chair of the Immigration Committee of this organization. Mr. Norman Beach is currently an adult ESL teacher. He's also with the Campaign for Stable Funding for Adult ESL Programs. Gloria, as an advocate in immigration and settlement policy, what do you think about this increased budget?
Well, I think when I look at the budget, I was so glad to see that there are 298 millions being assigned for immigration and settlement service. However, when I analyzed the details, I came to realize that actually the budget itself is quite delusive, because when I look at the allocation of the funding, I noticed that in the first few years, actually the funding is very, very limited. Say, for instance, in the very first year, there are only 20 millions being assigned, and then second year's only 35 millions, and then third year 55 millions, and the big chunk won't come until the last 2 years. For the last year is 108 million.
Right.
So my question is, we are already desperately in need of more settlement funding in order to help newly landed immigrants to more successfully integrate into our society. So we do need the money now, not 4 years, not 5 years from now.
Right.
Yeah. So I and actually quite a lot of friends are also joking about this budget. We said that, well, with the minority government being in place, we're not even sure how long they will last. Probably in a year or maybe 2 years' time, they're going to call it re-election.
Right.
It's a nice promise.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So they might be making a commitment that they will not be responsible for.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So what do you think, Norman?
Yeah, and I think that I felt exactly the same way as Gloria did, as a matter of fact. When the budget came out, I was very pleased. And in fact, I was surprised because, and I think Gloria had the same reaction. We felt at first that this was a great step forward. It was only when you analyze it and see the nitty-gritty and the bottom line and where it's going that actually Gloria is absolutely right that 20 million in the first year is not going to go very far, and aside from the fact that the money won't even come until December this year. So for my students, I actually work in a provincially funded program, but I deal with a lot of students through my work on the campaign, and I know that those who are federally funded are not going to see much difference at all, because this year is a bit of a crunch year. The funding has been unchanged now for almost 10 years. So everything is catching up now.
Right.
Yeah.
The problems, the chickens are coming home to roost, basically. It's been stuck at 173 million for 10 years. No inflation. Inflation has continued. It doesn't help. There's no money for inflation. And furthermore, it doesn't matter whether the immigrant numbers go up or down. The funding stays exactly the same. After 10 years of this, there's not much give left in the system. And classes are closing. In fact, now that the long-term trend for immigration has been up for all this time and the funding has not increased, spending for each immigrant has gone down.
Right.
So programs are closing. And there was actually, there's been 50 classes closed, federally funded language classes in the last few months in the Toronto District School Board alone.
Yeah.
So it's coming, it's hitting the ground now. They were even going to close a whole school in Etobicoke for language training for adults, but there was an article in a community paper, so the school board put off the closing.
So that's why you said you need to. This issue has to be addressed right away.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Because actually, when you look at the first few years, limited funding, I'm not even sure whether they are sufficient to cover the inflationary rate. So we do need the money now, not later.
Right.
So I don't understand why the federal government has spread out the funding so unevenly throughout the 5 years.
That's right.
Unlike the other budget, basically all the the allocation of money is evenly spread. But for immigration, the big chunk won't happen until the last 2 years.
In terms of the distribution, the Premier of Ontario has mentioned that there should be more money allocated for
Oh,
Ontario.
absolutely, absolutely.
Why is that?
Well, I think what happened is that Ontario province has been accepting majority of immigrant from abroad. However, over the last couple of years, I think the settlement funding assigned for the immigrant in the Ontario province per person is only slightly over $800 as compared to $3,800 for Quebec province.
Right.
So it's so inequitable.
Don't point at me when you say that, Gloria.
Yeah.
I'm not from Quebec.
Well,
And we have 57% of immigrants coming to Toronto.
Oh yes,
right?
more than that
So
actually.
the distribution
Yeah.
seems very uneven to me.
Actually, I want to clarify my point. I'm not saying that Quebec does not deserve that funding. Actually, to the contrary, we applaud right the government's allocation of sufficient funding for Quebec. But we hope that principle will apply to other provinces as well. Actually, according to a set of recommendations put forward by the Standing Committee on CIC in the year of 2003, actually the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration proposed that at least $3,000 should be assigned to each immigrant in
Right,
terms
right.
of settlement funding. So I think the present $800 is definitely insufficient, and I fully support our Ontario government in the fight for increased funding. Otherwise, we cannot help our newly landed immigrants to successfully integrate and also contribute themselves to Canadian society.
Right.
And that is going to result in a big waste to Canadian society as a whole.
Right. So Norman, what do you think about this uneven distribution?
Yeah, I think that Gloria has really put her finger on this problem, because it's not only the budget. It's also the fact that for all this time now, ever since Brian Mulroney actually signed this deal with Quebec, and I don't blame Quebecers for taking the money that was offered to them or being good negotiators, but it is a very sweet deal. Basically, it doesn't matter whether the newcomer numbers go down in Quebec, the funding will not go down, according to the deal. So actually the government's hands are tied. And I think that's why the committee said that we really need to bring everybody else up to the level of Quebec or close to it. And I don't think that that would be a bad thing to do, because I think in the end it will help our whole country.
I think, I also would like to add one more point to this. I think we shouldn't forget that every single immigrant, when he or she lands in Canada, they have to pay $975 landing fee to Canadian government, and that is meant to cover all the settlement services, in Canada.
Right.
So
And
it's
they're
meant.
not getting back all the
No,
money.
not at all. Particularly for Ontario province, while federal government has been talking about investing in immigrants, Ontario's immigrants are actually paying for their settlement services. They are not getting even the equal amount of money that they have paid for, paid to the federal government. So it's absolutely unfair. And also, according to Stat Canada's research, actually by 2015, I think Canada's economy largely rely on immigrants in continuing and also sustaining the economic growth. So without helping these immigrants to, successfully find a job and also integrate into a society, I don't think, our immigration policies is going to, will be able to achieve, the objectives that it has set
So
for
it
itself.
seems like that we are losing sight of the long-term
Exactly.
growth of
Yeah.
Canada.
Yeah.
And so, Gloria, what do you have other comments on the present settlement policies?
I think actually there are quite a lot of problems with the present settlement policy. I think first of all, for a lot of non-government agencies, what we call NGOs, I think over the last couple of years, the core funding and also operational funding has been eliminated drastically by the government. And in order to successfully deliver settlement services that will meet the actual need of the newly landed immigrants, we do need adequate and also ongoing operational funding for NGOs so that they can, maintain, a certain level of settlement services for the newly landed immigrants. But this is not happening. So I think funding issues definitely the very first issue we have to address. And then secondly, I think that also we have also identified a lot of gaps among the three levels of governments in the delivery of settlement services to newly landed immigrants. And we also would like to call upon the three levels of government to enhance the kind of dialogue and also coordination among themselves.
Can you give an example?
Well, I think what happened is that in recent years, I think one of the major problems that a lot of professional immigrants, or what we call skilled workers, have encountered is the difficulty in getting access to professionals and trades. And one of the major barriers, apart from unreasonable barriers being set up by the various professional trades and associations, I think that is also the language problem. Meaning many of the professionals who came here as skilled workers, they also need to adapt, to the Canadian professional language. And however, I think in the so-called ESL program, I don't think they have actually met the specific need of the skilled workers. So that's why over the last couple of years, we've been advocating for so-called occupation-specific language training for the skilled workers. And that means, the English training program could be geared towards the specific need of specific profession, such as engineers, doctors, nurses, maybe even accounting clerks.
Sure.
Right? It should be,
more specific.
Exactly. It should be organized in such a way to meet the specific need of different sector according to the actual situation in each province. However, I don't see that kind of flexibility being given to the various NGOs in the meantime.
I think a lot of us has been through the ESL program ourselves, and obviously those programs are teaching us daily languages of English instead of geared towards certain professions. So Norman, what is your analysis on this ESL program, being the instructor?
Right. Well, there's a few things that definitely, I would say that my students have taught me a lot more in some ways than I have taught them. It's a remarkable experience when you have people from all over the world coming together in one class. I have had professionals in my class. A lot of them are professionals. I had a woman from Iran who really wanted to be a doctor. Her husband and this woman, Mazad, had been doctors in Iran. The husband came to Canada, had a little better English, and was able to work in his field. But Mazad needed more English in order to work. She came to my class, and it's a provincially funded class. But she found that not only was she able to improve her English, but she was able to integrate more into Canadian society. A lot of immigrants, when they arrive, have tremendous adjustment problems. They have they're like a fish out of water quite often.
Yeah.
And if you meet with other people who are in the same position, it helps you get through these problems. And there are numerous issues that I think language impacts on, and that is one. It's not only getting your professional accreditation, it's also being able to talk to the children's teachers, for example. And that has a huge impact on children's education. It's health issues. I have a student who is a senior, and he takes other seniors to visit specialists because it's very hard for them to find a specialist who speaks their language.
Right.
Yeah.
He's learned enough English in my class that he can help other seniors. I mean, otherwise they rely on their family members to take them and make appointments, and it's not always possible. You know?
So, but from your class, it's still like a general ESL program, right?
Yeah.
So do they have struggles in learning the professional languages?
That's right. I mean, I'm not in the provincially funded program. We are not really set up in general to do these professional accreditation, I should say professional language programs. And that's what they call enhanced language training. And that's federally funded.
Right.
Unfortunately, the program, which was a good move initially, requires anybody to run it to cost share.
Yeah.
So all
I
the
see.
agencies that want to get involved in this federal program have to put up half the money themselves. And you can't find agencies in Toronto that have the money to do that.
Right. It's very
Even-
expensive to hold this
Oh,
program.
yes,
and for
absolutely.
non-profit organizations, we all know, they are always short of money.
Yeah.
And
Non-profit
they're always
is
too much to
sometimes
do
no
and
money.
too little money.
Actually, I've
So-
talked to a few community organizations serving immigrants and refugees, such as Wood Green or even other frontline agencies. They said that they just don't have the money to pay for that 50% cost share portion, and that's why, you know, this program's initiative or original intention is good. However, it's not practical because whereabout are these agencies going to find that 50% cost in order to support the program unless they enter into partnership with some big organization who have the financial resources from somewhere else to match with the funding.
Do you have any statistics? How many NGOs has been able to successfully get the funding and provide those programs?
I have some actually, and unfortunately they're few and far between. In Toronto, there are only a few programs running
Only a few.
that NGOs are involved in. There's some programs run through colleges. The Ministry of Colleges and Training has started to get involved in this. But Ontario still has very few of these programs. There are a lot of other provinces out west, Manitoba and BC have a lot more programs than we do, even though they have fewer immigrants. And one of the reasons is they had a much better deal from the federal government on their immigration agreements. Quebec got the sweetest deal, but other provinces have been able to make relatively good deals, which gives them more money. And as a result of that, the provinces are cost sharing in the West much more than the Ontario government is able to do.
Right. Thanks, Norman. So I think it's time for us to have a break. Please stay tuned, and we'll come back in a few minutes.
Great.
Welcome back to Toronto TV live broadcast. Tonight we are talking about the concerns and implications on the current federal budget on immigration settlement services. This is the second part. Norman, there's also a mentorship program that is developed to help skilled workers to find jobs in Ontario and in Canada. Can you comment on this program?
Yeah, we're going to share this with Gloria, but I'd like to start off by saying that I think the mentorship program is something that has been asked for a long time. It's a bit of a job shadowing program, and where people who arrive in this country, although they may be fully trained in a certain area, could really benefit by having advice and to help them get used to the way things are done here in Canada by someone who is in the field and who has worked in the field, because a lot of employers have found that there are sometimes communication difficulties, and then there are also sometimes other difficulties relating to culture and other things that it would be helpful for a skilled worker from another country to get advice on.
And it is also a volunteer program as well, so it won't cost the federal any money. So it sounds like a good program, isn't it?
I think basically the intention is good. However, I'm a very practical person. I'm also concerned about the number of people who can benefit from this program, because so far I think only very limited number of immigrants can join this program. So I think I'm more concerned about the effectiveness of the entire program in helping, the entire population of skilled workers to successfully enter into the professional and trades. So most likely, I think the result of the program is that, the federal government may be able to create a few successful model. However, how about the majority of people who cannot, who don't even have the opportunity to enter into this program?
There are always waiting lists.
Exactly.
That's true.
And
there are quite a lot of people who have been left unattended, without any specific help from the government. So I hope it will be broadened to cover more. However, I think the more practical way to help professionals is really to, first of all, the federal government should work very closely with the provincial government to remove unreasonable barriers in their access to professional trades. And then secondly, they should also take a more holistic approach to the provision of settlement services to all immigrants. We are not only referring to skilled workers. We should also include or pay attention to family members who came together with the principal applicants alongside with other categories of immigrants as well.
Right, so it sounds like the mentorship has a very small scope. It's a program that should be encouraged, but it only covers professionals, and a lot of the settlement services should also be offered to other type of immigrants as well.
Yeah,
so
this is definitely a problem, because right now the focus is on labor market, and there is no focus at all on non-labor market issues, as Gloria was saying. The family members who come also, not only do they help the family and help in the adjustment, but I strongly believe that particularly the older members of the family have contributed to the skills that immigrant is bringing to Canada for free. And we rarely think of that. It's like a contract between generations.
Right.
And if the parents cannot come and get services when they arrive that they need, even if the parents are not destined for the labor market, then I think we've failed in that contract.
I think a lot of people consider the parents coming to Canada as burden to the society instead, so they don't think that we should spend a lot of money in the settlement services. So what do you think, Gloria?
Actually, in 2003, when I participated in the Toronto hearing of the Standing Committee on CIC, I also advocated for federal government to broaden the eligibility of ESL program to naturalized citizens, meaning because the present policy only offer ESL language training to newly landed immigrant. But after you have studied the program for a number of years, after you have attained the citizenship status, you're
Right.
no longer
Forgot, yeah.
qualified for the
Yeah.
program. However, we should take into consideration that for many of the senior people, it's really hard for them to. Probably Norman would know much
Right.
better than I do. He can
Yeah.
tell you a lot of edge cases. A lot of senior people do, need training, language
Yes.
training
Mhm.
over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
The same also applies for those people who cannot continuously attend a ESL class because of work.
Yes.
Yeah, say for instance, for those people who have been working, they just don't find the time. So what if maybe several years down the road, if they find that, I still need to get some
Yes.
language training, but then they may have already passed that stage when they are qualified,
Right,
and they are
right,
no
right.
longer accepted
Absolutely.
into the class.
Right.
You're only
So-
really eligible within the first few years of your arrival.
Mhm.
There are a
Exactly.
very large number of people who came here and they have to put food on the table. They
Yeah.
can't study
Exactly.
language when they first arrive.
Yeah.
They got to put food on the table, so they end up working. And then when they need to learn English, when they might be a little older or when they get laid off, they're not eligible for federally funded language training. And I think that's absurd.
And there are always changes in their lives. I know that a lot of parents rely on the children to speak English for them.
Yeah.
And when they grow up, a lot of them work elsewhere in other cities or even other countries. So now the parents have to rely on themselves and have to
Exactly.
learn English. So
Well, actually, the problem could be even more serious than that. Even for parents, first generation immigrant parents who live together with their children, there may still be a language gap between the two generations, because
Sure.
for children who have been brought up here when they're young, they start to pick up, English.
Canadianisms.
Yes.
Exactly, English language or even French language very, very quickly.
Right.
And then when they grow up to a certain age, probably they have totally forgotten about their,
Their first language.
The first language, maybe
Yeah.
Chinese, maybe Indian, or whatever.
Sure.
And then there will be, a generation gap,
Right.
a language gap between the two generations. So in order to help to close that gap, it's so important for the language training program to make made available for the senior people, for the parents who have to work,
right.
during the first few years when they first landed here.
Sure.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lots of my students come for that reason.
Right.
They want to understand their kids better. Yeah.
Let's talk about the negotiation between the Ontario government and the federal government. As we all know, the negotiation is underway.
Yes.
So what can we, Ontario citizens, do to affect the outcome of this process?
I think what we have heard is that the Ontario government will start the negotiations very soon, and I think the agreement is going to be published, or to be announced probably sometime in May. So we are really running short of time, right? To put a to give our input in that. But recently, as Canada Hong Kong Link, we have been invited to a roundtable called by our MPP, Mr. Tony Wong, for Chinese Canadian community, and we did treasure that opportunity to be able to voice our concerns, right, in the present agreement negotiation between the Ontario government and the federal government. However, I think one of the key issues is that I think the Ontario government should make the entire process more transparent, and they should also try to engage NGOs and also community organizations that are concerned about settlement services,
Right.
immigration policy, so that they can also provide input in the entire process. Yeah.
So there's no
consider-
public hearing processes at this point by the
No, no.
provincial government.
Yeah. So we do hope that there will be, some sort of like a regular consultation, committee being set up to engage NGOs and community organizations in, the formulation of immigration policies as well as settlement policies for Ontario. So this is the part that we would like to see from the Ontario
Right.
government.
A lot of this stuff is actually being negotiated almost in the papers, as you know, because the Premier will make a comment about the unfairness of the allotment,
Yeah.
and then the Immigration Minister will talk back, and I think that in a way what what the Ontario government is trying to do here is that rather than have a formal process of consulting with the community, I think what they're hoping is that the community will get behind them
Right.
in addressing this unfair settlement funding, where Ontario is completely underfunded with relation to the rest of Canada. I mean, we get most of Canada's immigrants, and we get about 1/3 of the settlement money.
So what we can do
So-
is to actively participate
Yeah.
within your NGO to raise the concern, and also hopefully we can also raise our voice in Tony Wong's
Yeah.
here,
I think what happened is that our Ontario Premier, Mr. McQuinty, has already called upon the federal government for a more equitable, allocation of funding to Ontario, given the large number of immigrants that have decided to settle down in our province. So we are in full support of that, and then actually just recently, because I personally have participated in a number of roundtables around that issue. So hopefully in the near future, the NGOs and also community organizations that are concerned about this agreement between the two levels of government can come together, and probably maybe through some sort of actions we can also support our Ontario government in the fight for increased funding.
I think people should make their voices heard.
Yeah, that absolutely.
Even as individuals to your Member of Parliament, because the Members of Parliament for Toronto, for example, have been virtually silent on this issue. They don't want to buck their leader, since almost all of them are Liberals, and it's typical negotiation, and they're kind of closing ranks. But actually, I think that if they're going to represent their constituents, they're going to have to make it very clear to the Prime Minister that Ontario needs a better deal for the sake of the immigrants who are here and for the whole province.
Yeah.
I understand that the House of Commons Standing Committee on Immigration and Citizenship, CIC, is doing a cross-Canada consultation. Can you tell us more about this, Gloria?
Well, actually, the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration has been doing consultation across Canada from time to time. I think the very last time was in the year 2003, in which I also participated in the Toronto hearing on behalf of the Chinese Canadian community. I also submitted a deputation on settlement policy and programs to the Standing Committee. And this time they are doing another round of cross-Canada consultation. Basically, they have outlined 3 topics, and they welcome community organizations and NGOs to provide the input on the 3 topics. And these 3 topics are what we expect from the new Citizenship Act. Number 2, recognition of international experience and credentials. Actually, under this category, we can also address our concerns with respect to settlement policies. Number 3, we are also asked to provide input on family reunification. Whether we are satisfied with the process, the definition of family members so far. And so these are the 3 topics to be consulted upon. And the Toronto hearing is going to take place on the 13th and 14th of April. As Canada-Hong Kong link, because we have been very, very concerned about immigration issue and also settlement issues. So we have also registered ourselves in this Toronto hearing. Actually, we are going to participate in the hearing section on international experience and credential recognition on 14th of April.
I see. So what would you expect for this hearing, Norman?
Well, I was also at the previous hearing in 2003, and when we made our presentation on behalf of the Campaign for Stable Funding, we were really pleased that the MPs were interested in the issue and then came out with a report where they reflected a lot of the concerns that Gloria and I have been talking about today. It came out in the report. We were pleased and thought that something might happen. Well, as a matter of fact, very little has happened in the years since relating to that report. The only thing that did come out was the occupation-specific language training, which we had advocated, and which many organizations were advocating for, and it's happened now. However, it's a as we've talked about in the budget, it's a tiny step forward in terms of money allotted in the first year. And meanwhile, all kinds of settlement agencies are facing crises and classes will be closing. So it sort of seems like 2 steps backward and 1 step forward. So I don't know what will happen now. We'll just have to hope that this time they will not only listen and make a good suggestion, but that the implementation will occur as well.
Yeah, actually, in the year 2003, right after the consultation has been completed, the Standing Committee has actually come up with a whole series of recommendations. Very positive recommendations, which basically reflect, many of the positive points that we have raised during the hearing.
And then it's sat on the shelf.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of the election and all that?
I know. I think what happened is that because during that time the Liberal government represented the majority government, and when this set of recommendations were proposed by the Standing Committee at the Parliament, basically it was knocked down, and then it was left unattended, and then there was no concrete result, and the Parliament did not really act upon act on the recommendations put forward by the Standing Committee. So I think, one of our very important strategy, as how to deal with this coming Toronto hearing or the cross-Canada consultation is refer back to the positive recommendations put forward by the Standing Committee in the year 2003, and then really nail all the politicians onto these positive recommendations.
Yeah,
and hopefully this time...
That can only be done if the people support.
But what is the
support
reason
us.
why that proposal is being knocked down by the Parliament?
Lack of public interest. I would seriously say that not enough people are speaking up to support these points. Politicians will always listen to their constituents, and if they get mail or if they get phone calls on an issue, they will take the issue seriously. If they don't get mail or phone calls on an issue, they will not take it seriously. I think we will run into the same problem here if people don't speak up.
Yeah, I think that's the question of how the immigrants can actively participate in the democratic system as well.
Yeah, I think definitely as an individual citizen, we can always participate in the consultation process. Probably not as a organizational representative who actually participate in the hearing, right? But we can always talk to our own MP and voice out to him or her about our concerns, right? With respect to the present immigration policy and also settlement policy. So this is one way how an individual can respond. And then the other part is regarding our own community as a whole. Actually, we just 2 or 3 weeks ago, Canada-Hong Kong Link, together with the Chinese-Canadian National Council and also the Chinese Professional Association of Canada.
Interagency network as well.
Yeah, exactly. We have organized a round table to gather input from different sectors of our community toward this forthcoming Toronto hearing. So we are very glad that a lot of organizations such as Chinese Interagency Network and as well CCEVI, as well as individual researchers and lawyers have participated in this roundtable. And we had a very, very good discussion and also exchange of views. And in the future, actually, we will also we also plan to probably organize even a broader roundtable involving other ethnic community organizations as well, so that there will be a broader exchange of views.
So will that happen before the public hearing?
Oh, absolutely.
CIC?
Yeah,
Mhm,
yeah. I think probably there will be some discussion or maybe meeting prior to the actual hearing, and then after, probably during the the 2 days of Toronto hearing, we also plan to probably do something to publicize our proposals to the public as well as to our media.
Okay, thank you, Norman and Gloria, for sharing with us your opinions.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey.
And,
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Yeah.
for listening to the live broadcast program as well. Good night.
Good night.
Right.